I spend some time on Twitter, or X now, and what I do is I comment on various threads because the the way that it's set up right now in X for me, and I've been on there since 2012, is pretty severely shadow banned, and I have my theories as to why that's the case, but it's been true the whole time I've been on there. And when Musk took over, he dealt with a lot of issues of censorship and so forth. But one of the issues that he didn't deal with, which he should have, in any case, was to go back into the algorithms, the sort of deep algorithmic structure of X, and find some of these algorithms that were in place back when essentially X, when it was Twitter, was an extension of the national security state. So, but I discovered that if I go on other people's threads and I comment on there, I escape whatever filter they've put on my profile, and I get hundreds and sometimes thousands of likes for things that I post on other people's threads. And that's actually led to a growth in the number of followers. But I'm sure, I gain some followers and then I'll lose one or two or whatever, because my guess is that they say, oh, this is great content, so I'm just going to follow this guy and read his content. But if it never shows up in their feed, then they're going to think, well, he doesn't ever post to his feed. You have to intentionally come over to my feed to see it. And so that's a real problem. In any case, but just to set that up, I wanted to get that out there. When I do that, it's like I'll see a thread and I'll say, oftentimes I'll disagree with people who say really dumb things, and sometimes I'll see something, I'm like, okay, whatever, everybody's got to have the right take on that, and then I'll read through the threads and I'm like going, good Lord. So a day or so, a couple of days ago, there was this one, there's a video that was circulating on X, and it's a man who's filming in public. I guess he got a tripod set up, and he's just filming. And what he's doing is what's called First Amendment auditing. It's something that you do to stress test the First Amendment, freedom of press. So you set up a camera in a public area, which you're completely free to do. It's your constitutional right to record in public. People who are in public have no expectation of privacy, therefore there's no legitimate complaint they could make. And so he sets his camera up and sees how many people are like just going about their lives. You've seen those old reels from back in the film days. We're starting to see more and more of them because they're being restored by AI, where it's like the early 1900s, late 19th century, some of them early 1900s, and people walking around in daily life, and somebody, the movie camera was new, so somebody sets up a movie camera and then they just film a busy street. People are buying newspapers, people are walking about. This is activities of daily living, and we look at those and we're like, this is awesome. You don't see any instance in any of those. There's quite a lot of them where people walk up and are asking, so what are you doing? Now, there are people who are aware of the camera and pose for it, sit and watch the guy and whatever who's filming. But sometimes when you set up a camera in a public space, somebody will come up and they'll say, what are you recording? What are you doing here? And that's the stress test piece, because certainly in a free society, you have the freedom to ask somebody what they're doing. But it's a constitutionally permitted activity. And so what happens in this video, and you can go to my blog and read it, see it. It's the latest essay. And I have to tell you that WordPress, the table of contents function, the menu function, is really not difficult to figure out. It's easy to do. It's just when you bring it up, it takes forever for it to load, and then you have to do a few, and you have to move them up to the top, and then you put the welcome, back down, have to move it back up to where it is supposed to be. And sometimes it'll just glitch and shut down, and you save it, and it doesn't ever like just save. It saves, and then the system crashes, and you have to hope that it updated your menu. So, so my table of contents are way behind, and I'll do like 10 or 20 essays, and then try to update it. So there's some that have I can't see, that I can't even attempt to put them up there. Anyway, but so the best way to read my blog is just to go there and just scroll down through the stories until you find one that you're interested in. So it's the latest one, and so I have the X video there for you to see, and I guess I could show it here. We could try doing that. So we could do a Windows capture. And so the window that I'll want is, see, Andrew Austin blog on Safari. Bypass the system private window picker and directly access. This will, allow that, I guess. And so, yeah, this is what it looks like. All right. And so I'll come over here and I'll scroll up, right? Now, I don't think you'll be able to hear this. I think we'll see. It'd be nice, but I think I have to do something different for you to actually sort of get an input to the sound here.
I'm sorry?
What are you filming?
What am I filming?
Yeah.
Filming a video.
Well, one could assume.
There you go.
On what?
On...
Yeah,
wow. Yes, of course you can.
Yes.
So what I do is I stress test our First Amendment right to the freedom of press in public.
Uh-huh. Would you like to elaborate?
What part didn't you understand?
Well, you say freedom of press, so that means I assume that you're reporting on something. What's your topic?
Right, there you go. This is it. The freedom of press.
You don't have a specific topic?
Okay, so it goes on like that. And what is frustrating, let me get rid of this Windows capture. This is part of why I'm doing this, kind of figure it out. So this goes on for like 4 minutes and 17 seconds, and he explains it very clearly. And this woman is feigning ignorance. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can you explain it? Like, which he has no obligation to, right? So again, this is First Amendment auditing. It's an activity that's rooted in the constitutional right to record in public spaces. There's no expectation for privacy in public. The man's breaking no laws, recording activities of daily living in public spaces. The woman is dissatisfied with his answer when he explains that and presses him further, insisting, right, that his reason isn't specific enough. And her questioning seems benign at first. You can see that he kind of, or if you couldn't hear that, you can see in the beginning that he's like, okay, she's going to make this a drawn out hassle. And it begins to cross the line because she continues to press him despite him having given her a legitimate and legally sound answer. Now, the video ends before she leaves, so I don't know what the outcome of the interaction was. The man on the camera is calm and patient throughout, but when you read the thread, it's really incredible how many people thought he was the arrogant one, that he was obnoxious, and that she was being patient. But she's obviously, as I said before, feigning ignorance to rationalize her desire to hassle the man. And when I say it's about to cross a line, the line it's about to cross is into harassment. That occurs when someone persistently confronts or questions, pressures another person who's lawfully exercising his rights, despite him having, despite having received a clear and reasonable explanation. She's right on the edge. And in fact, that's why I wonder if there's more to the video, because you have to understand that she has a right to come up and ask him what he's videoing. But once he explains and she persists, an interaction that you have with the person is when it becomes unwarranted, or not unwarranted, unwanted, and persistent crosses over into harassment. So somebody may come up to me on the street and say, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "I'm fine." Yeah, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean fine, right? So my first thing is, I'm thinking, and I've had these kind of conversations on the street. Am I dealing with a paranoid schizophrenic or a drug addict or a bum or somebody who's, and I'm like, I don't have any obligation to interact with you, so I'm going to go about my business. Well, they follow me and they keep interacting with me. That's harassment. It's not free speech anymore at that point. One can ask questions, but one can't harass somebody who doesn't want to have that interaction. And so he states his lawful purpose. He's exercising a First Amendment right. Any continued insistence that he justify himself further, if it's in a persistent, confrontational manner, may cross the line from causal inquiry into intrusive, unwanted behavior. And so, harassment is not simply asking a question. It's a refusal to accept an answer and then an attempt to coerce or intimidate, to shame, harangue somebody into changing their lawful conduct to suit the other person's preferences. Like, the motive here is, the best I read it is that I don't think people should just be able to videotape in public unless they have a good reason. Well, you don't need a good reason. You don't need a reason at all. His reason is that I'm videotaping in public. I can, so I am. He's generous for answering her question. He actually tells her 3 times. And she never gets it. Not because she's stupid, just she doesn't want to get it. And then as I'm having these conversations with people, I'm trying to explain to them about this. They get really angry, like somehow it said that she didn't have a right to ask the question. I very clearly said, of course you can ask this question. That's not the point. And I said that the way that she's being it was a dick move. It's like it's kind of like, if there's a fat person sitting on a park bench, you go sit down beside them and you say to them, "Hey, why are you so fat?" You have freedom of speech to ask that question. There's nothing criminal about asking that question. It's rude, but you can ask it. But if the person says, "Look, I don't want to talk about this. This is about, you're offending me, whatever. Don't be so rude." And you say, "No, but I'm serious. I mean, can't you give me an explanation? Why don't you give me an explanation? Why are you so fat?" This person keeps bugging this person. That's a dick move. Suppose you have this is another example. This is an example I use, an analogy. I do that often because I think it gets to the principle of the matter. If a man is walking down the street and he's carrying a sidearm in a state which allows you to, open carry, and somebody comes up and says, "Hey, why do you have a gun?" Okay, reasonable question, I guess. The person says, "Well, self-defense." Because one of the arguments that people were making in this thread is that, well, you don't know what his intent is. What if it's bad intent? Like, what would be the bad intent of videoing in public? I just want to capture people going about the activities of daily living. It's there's cameras are set up all the time. I gave lots of examples. When on my way from the parking lot to my office, I'll see news media sometimes have the camera set up, just shooting various shots. They're probably going to do a story on the university. For the nightly news, or I see students, we have a lot of wildlife, and so they're out there with cameras doing wildlife, or they're doing video projects or whatever. I could walk up and say, "Hey, what are you recording?" They could tell me, but if I continue to, bother them, I'm actually interfering with their First Amendment right. They're trying to do something, and I'm being a nuisance. In fact, I'm harassing them. And I couldn't call the police to say, "Hey, police, come get these people out of here with a video camera because I don't want to be videotaped." Well, if I didn't want to be videotaped, why am I bothering them? Why am I putting myself on the videotape? Makes no sense. But the police could come and ask me to leave because they have a First Amendment right to do this. Why are you interfering with their First Amendment right? In fact, looking at my essay, I'll probably come back in and say something about it because I could make that a little bit clearer. Although, except in this particular case, because he's doing First Amendment auditing and doing a stress test of freedom of the press, the fact that the person is interfering with what he's doing is actually the data that he's gathering to show how little people respect free speech. So he wins, right? He gets what he's going for, and it's great because she had no business going up there to begin with, and certainly had no business continuing to press him. So, this explains kind of I think a misunderstood dynamic that exists in our society with video recording these days, and I see this all the time. Like, you don't have my permission. We've seen that billboard Chris, and he goes out there and he's got a billboard and he sets up a camera, and his whole purpose is to get people to stop and ask him. There's a thing about children can't consent to puberty blockers or various breadboard. I think that's what it's called. No, well, just placards that you wear. I forget the. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. And he just walks around like that. And sometimes he has somebody else walking around with that as well. And they're both together and they're videotaping. And people stop and then they have a conversation about transgenderism and all that. Okay. Well, he invites them to come talk to him. So if they have a long debate, well, that's just, that's the content of the video that he'll share on Twitter. So it's all good. That's what you're supposed to have happen. Sometimes they'll say, I didn't give you permission to video me. And it's just like, well, I don't need your permission. It's just public. You came up to me. You're talking to me. There's nothing you can do about it. And so the misunderstanding, I think, that a lot of people are having when they see this is the difference between legal rights and social expectations. This man has no obligation to offer an answer that satisfies a stranger's curiosity beyond what the law requires. Really, the law doesn't require you to really say anything. And that if he just says, hey, I'm exercising my First Amendment right, that's not, only specific. This woman wanted something specific from him. It's very specific. It's entirely sufficient. And then continued demands for a more palatable reason reveal less about the cameraman's supposed arrogance and more about the interrogator's sense of entitlement. And actually, when you watch this, you say, well, he's being obnoxious or arrogant. And it's like, no, she is. Clearly arrogant and obnoxious. All he's doing is standing there passively with a camera. If you say, well, it's a provocation, well, a provocation for people who don't respect the First Amendment are inclined to walk up to people and ask them what they're doing. And so when people really hated that I call this a dick move. It's like, well, she has a right to ask. I'm like, of course she does. But the freedom to ask a question and the content of the question that's asked, those are separate issues. I have the freedom to say dickish things. I have the freedom to say obnoxious things. And boy, she sure does. And the bottom line, anyway, just to wrap this up, it's at 26 minutes. The man has a First Amendment right to record in public. That's number one. I can give you Supreme Court cases. There's no expectation of privacy in public. When you go out, you have to expect that you're going to be on cameras. If you go to the beach and people are taking pictures of other people and whatever, and you're in the background, tough. Wait, I don't want you to have that picture because I'm in my bikini. And what you might take a picture of me in my bikini and put it on the internet, in some porn site or something. Well, you're not a model. You don't know if somebody's going to generate money from that or whatever. You're out in public. People have cameras. You're going to videotape them. You have no control over what they do with the video. If you're not prepared for that, to take that risk, I did a terrible thing. To say that a person's own personal sense of freedom will be restricted by the fact that there's cameras around, but your entire life you've grown up with cameras around. Your entire life you've grown up with people who have eyes who are looking at you. I can look at anything I want in public. So I can look at it with my eyes, or I can put a camera in between my eyes and what I'm looking at. I could sketch pictures of people. I could, and you can say, hey, what you sketching there? I'm like, well, I'm sketching you. Sketching a picture of you. But you can't stop a person from sketching a picture of somebody. I can draw you if I want. I can paint a picture if you want. If I set up an easel, I got the paint, got this wonderful landscape or a park, right? And there are people playing and whatever. I'm just painting what I'm seeing. And if I want to paint you, I'll paint you. Just like I can go out and observe the stars, or I can observe a tree, or I can look at some squirrels playing or whatever. I'm free to record the universe around me in any way I want. Except when it comes to when you're in the privacy of your own home. I can't point a camera in your window or videotape you taking a shower and so forth, the First Amendment doesn't apply to you in your home. You know what I'm saying? My First Amendment right stops where your real privacy begins. But since you have no expectation of privacy in a public space, there's nothing you can do about it. This man who's in public with a camera, he's not harassing anyone. That's a passive activity. I just set up a camera and I'm just recording. I'm on a public space. I care if I'm recording business. Somebody said, well, what if a person with a camera is driving away customers? So the businessman have a reason to complain that a person's, right? Well, there's loitering laws in part designed to do that. But if I'm sitting on a park bench and I'm just looking at your store, or I'm sitting in a park bench and I'm videotaping your store, if people don't want to go in your store, I mean, maybe I'm doing a story about the fact that your store has a bad reputation. You've been ripping off customers. And I'm doing a news story about it. That's completely legitimate. Right? I don't have to give you that reason. That's completely legitimate. I could do that. So a man with a camera provokes responses. No more provokes responses, I should say, than than a man with a sidearm in an open carry state. Just because I'm walking around with a gun is not a provocation. I can legally have a sidearm. I got a sidearm. And the woman is permitted to speak as long as the interaction is mutual. And as soon as it's unwarranted, it becomes harassing. And I've seen this thing has popped up to one main thread, and somebody copied that thread over. But I brought this particular issue of harassment, and this one person who showed this, like, she is? Like, couldn't understand that. Like somehow he was? And I said, yeah, 100%. She's risking harassment. I mean, if she had not gone away, if he said, I want this interaction to end, and she had not gone away, that clearly would have been harassment. Again, just look up the definition. It's like at the workplace, you can say to somebody who's sitting up and say, hey, having a good day? And the person can say, yeah, my day's good, whatever. Yeah, what you got planned for today? Well, I'm really busy kind of right now. Oh, come on, just stop for a second. I mean, you got time to answer that question. Now it's really starting to get over into harassment, right? I mean, and if I'm a worker and I go to my employer and I say, this guy over here, I don't want him coming over to my desk and ask me how I'm doing anymore. The employer can go over and say to the worker, this person doesn't want you going over there and asking her any questions. That makes her feel uncomfortable. She doesn't like it. You can't say, well, she's overreacting. How could it make her feel uncomfortable? She should, she should be nice, whatever. No. No. And if you persist in this, you're harassing her. And that's not free speech. And interfering with other people's free speech, right, by being disruptive is not free speech. If a person is doing a live video and they've got an audience that's watching and they're covering a story, and you keep getting in front of their camera and pushing them and being distracting and all those sorts of things, what you're doing is you're interfering with not only his free speech right, but with the free speech right of everybody who's watching the live stream. And I think the police need to be much more aggressive on this. Like, you have a right to protest. You have a right to go into an auditorium and give a speech and have people listen to it. You don't have the right to disrupt the speech. You don't have a right to interfere with other people's free speech activities. And this idea of counter speech being disruptive action, which it has political intent. So in some sense, I guess you could say it's political speech, but it's what's called the heckler's veto. And so every time this guy goes out, like, there's lots of people who do First Amendment auditing. Every time these guys go out and they do this, and somebody comes up to them, and sometimes the police officers are asking with them, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? It's like, none of your business. Now, sometimes you'll see, well, this is a national security issue here. We're worried that you could be gathering data for a terrorist attack and so forth and so on. We can start to get into some murky issues. But those are people who are in authority who are asking a question, and often most of the First Amendment auditing videos I've seen, the police really don't have a reason to interfere with the person. You know that. Yeah, I want to come into the police station, and what's paid for by the taxes. It's public. I can come in here, and I want to. I'm in the lobby, and I want to film it. I want to video this. Well, you can understand why they would say, well, you can't come back in here where the jail cells are and videotape people who are in jails and things like that. That there's some reason to be concerned about security in those circumstances. But to go in with a camera into a post office, or go into a camera with a camera and into the lobby of a police station or something like that, yeah. And I mean, the police have cameras. There's cameras everywhere. And as long as you are not recording somebody in a private space, such as a bathroom, right? Which just surprises me when I see like these cases of men who think they're women going into women's bathrooms and recording themselves sitting in the stall and harassing women, or showing them, so look at me in the woman's bathroom, you'll never stop me. I'm thinking, well, there's kind of two things. One is you're not supposed to be in that bathroom because you're a guy, and no amount of makeup or surgery or whatever will ever change that. But the second thing is, why are you filming in a private space? Okay, well, it's a public bathroom. Yeah, but there's an expectation of privacy in locker rooms, expectation of privacy in bathrooms, and so forth. So, but there's not, if I set up on a grassy knoll, or if I set up on the sidewalk and I'm just videotaping a city street, if I'm not impeding anybody's travel, if I'm not disrupting traffic, if I'm not creating a hazard or anything, I'm just sitting there videotaping, everybody who comes in front of my camera has no legitimate complaint whatsoever, because it's freedom of the press, freedom of speech.